I'm Joey, 32, a software engineer from Boston, who spent years building a nest egg only to discover $5,000 missing from my account. The money used by my parents to buy my sister Madison's engagement ring. The kicker? They threw a lavish celebration party and didn't even invite me. Family betrayal cuts deep, especially when they use your hard-earned money to fund the party you weren't welcome to attend. But this story has an ending they never saw coming. Before I dive into this wild journey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family take advantage of your generosity. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how I finally stood up for myself. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in South Boston wasn't easy. My parents Brian and Cheryl worked multiple jobs just to keep our family afloat. Dad was a plumber who took on weekend jobs, and Mom worked as a school secretary while also waitressing nights at a local diner. They always emphasized the importance of education, telling me and my younger sister Madison that it was our ticket to a better life. From the moment I turned 16, I started working after school at the local grocery store, stocking shelves and bagging groceries. Unlike Madison, who was encouraged to focus solely on her studies and social life, I was taught the value of hard work. Joey's the responsible one. My dad would say he understands sacrifice. At the time, I took it as a compliment, not recognizing the uneven expectations being set. Through high school, I maintained honor roll status while working 20 hours weekly. When college acceptance letters arrived, I chose the state university that offered me a partial scholarship, turning down my dream school because the financial math didn't make sense. Madison, 3 years younger, always talked about attending prestigious private colleges, and my parents never discouraged these aspirations, despite our financial reality. College was a grind. I majored in computer science, working at the university IT help desk during the day and delivering pizzas at night. I graduated with minimal student loans, $15,000, compared to the average $50,000 because I paid as I went. The day I walked across that stage, degree in hand, I felt immense pride, knowing I'd done it largely on my own. Landing my first job at TechSphere, a respected software company in downtown Boston, felt like the beginning of true financial independence. My starting salary of $65,000 seemed astronomical compared to what I'd been living on. Instead of upgrading my lifestyle, I lived as if I was still earning minimum wage. I found a modest one-bedroom apartment with reasonable rent, drove my decade-old Honda, and packed lunches daily. Every month, I followed a strict budget: 30% to rent and utilities, 15% to student loan repayment, 40% to savings and investments, and 15% for everything else. Within 3 years, I had paid off my student loans completely. By my 28th birthday, I had saved over $70,000, a feat that shocked even my financially savvy friends. My relationship with my parents began changing subtly after college. While they expressed pride in my career, conversations increasingly centered around Madison's struggles. She had attended an expensive private college majoring in communications and graduated with over $100,000 in student debt. Unable to find work in her field, she bounced between retail jobs, frequently running short on rent money. The first time my parents asked me to help out Madison was when she couldn't make her student loan payment 6 months after graduation. "It's just temporary," Mom assured me. "She's still finding her footing." I transferred $500 without hesitation. Family helps family, right? But temporary assistance became a pattern. Car repairs, security deposits when she moved apartments frequently, even covering her portion of a vacation she took with friends when she was going through a rough time. When I turned 30, my mother suggested we open a joint account for family emergencies. She explained that as my parents aged, having access to funds might be necessary for unexpected medical bills or home repairs. Being the dutiful son, I agreed, depositing $3,000 initially and adding to it periodically. I trusted them completely with this arrangement, never imagining they would consider my sister's engagement ring an emergency. My career continued to flourish. Last year, I was promoted to Senior Development Engineer, bringing my salary to $120,000 annually. The promotion came with a $15,000 bonus, which I split between my investment portfolio and savings account. I shared this good news with my family over dinner, perhaps unwisely mentioning the specific figures in my excitement. "You've come so far," Dad said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Always knew you'd be successful." Madison, who had recently started dating Trevor, a pharmaceutical sales representative, seemed quiet throughout my celebration dinner. Later, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Must be nice to have so much extra money," she said, her tone light, but with an undercurrent of resentment. "Some of us are still trying to make rent each month." I offered to help review her budget, maybe suggest ways to improve her financial situation. She declined, saying I wouldn't understand her circumstances. In retrospect, I should have recognized the growing tension and resentment, the seeds of what was to come, already taking root in fertile soil. By the spring of this year, my savings had grown to $120,000, a safety net. I had worked countless overtime hours and sacrificed countless social opportunities to build. I felt secure for the first time in my life, never suspecting that the greatest threat to my financial stability would come from those I trusted most. It was a Tuesday morning in April when everything fell apart. I was sipping coffee before work, scrolling through my banking app as part of my daily routine. At first I thought I had misread the number. Surely that couldn't be right. I blinked, looked again, and felt my stomach drop. $5,000 had been withdrawn from my savings account the previous day. My first thought was fraud. Someone had hacked my account, stolen my identity, or skimmed my card. Heart-pounding, I immediately called the bank's fraud department, ready to dispute the transaction and change all my passwords. "Mr. Lancaster, this withdrawal was made in person at our Dorchester branch," the representative explained after verifying my identity. "The transaction was completed by Cheryl Lancaster, who is a joint account holder. She provided proper identification and followed all protocols." My mother had withdrawn $5,000 without telling me. The knowledge hit like a physical blow. Had there been a medical emergency? Was Dad okay? Was the house in need of urgent repairs? My mind raced through possible scenarios as I dialed my mother's number with shaking hands. "Mom, I just checked my account. What's going on? Is everyone okay?" The panic in my voice must have been evident. There was a pause before she answered, her tone oddly evasive. "Everything's fine, Joey. I was going to call you today about that. Can I phone you back in an hour? I'm in the middle of something." "Mom, it's $5,000. I need to know what's happening now." "Don't worry, honey. It's all for a good cause. I'll explain everything later." She hung up before I could press further. Bewildered and increasingly angry, I tried calling my father, straight to voicemail. I texted both of them, "Need to talk as soon as possible about the money withdrawn from my account." No immediate response. With a sense of foreboding, I opened Instagram, where Madison posted daily updates about her life. There it was, posted 15 hours ago, a close-up photo of her hand sporting an enormous diamond ring. The caption read, "I said yes. Can't believe I'm marrying the love of my life. Thank you to my amazing parents for helping make this dream come true with this stunning ring. Engaged, future Mrs. Clark." I felt dizzy. Comments flooded the post, many mentioning how beautiful the celebration dinner had been. With growing horror, I scrolled through more recent posts from my extended family. My cousin Rachel had posted photos from what appeared to be an engagement party at the Harborview, one of Boston's most expensive restaurants. Celebrating Madison and Trevor's engagement with the family, the carousel of images showed my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone except me. In one photo, my mother was making a toast, champagne glass raised high. Another showed Madison tearfully hugging our grandmother. A third captured my father shaking hands with Trevor's father. The final image was a group shot, everyone I loved gathered together, smiling widely, without a single empty chair, suggesting my absence had even been noted. I stared at these images for what felt like hours, the realization slowly crystallizing they had used my money to buy Madison's engagement ring and thrown a celebration party without inviting me. The betrayal was so complete, so multi-layered, I couldn't process it all at once. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Rachel. "The party was amazing. Didn't get a chance to chat with you much. Let's catch up soon." She thought I'd been there, which meant they hadn't even told the extended family I wasn't invited. What explanation had they given for my absence? Or had I simply been so insignificant to the celebration that no one had noticed I wasn't there? I called my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, who had always been kind to me. Joey. How are you? Madison's news is so exciting, isn't it? Yeah, Aunt Susan. About the party. I was wondering. Oh, it was lovely. The Harborview did an amazing job. Your parents really went all out. So everyone was there, I asked carefully. The whole family. Well, except you, of course. Your mom said you had that big work project and couldn't get away. We missed you, but everyone understood. These things happen. A big work project. I hadn't spoken to my mother about work in weeks. They had fabricated an excuse for my absence, rather than admit they hadn't invited me. Aunt Susan, did Mom mention anything about the ring? Oh yes. She lowered her voice conspiratorially between us. She told me they used some of your emergency fund money to help with it. Wasn't that generous of you? $5,000 is a lot, but family is family, right? Madison deserves something special after all her struggles. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in stunned silence. They had used my money without asking, excluded me from a family celebration, and then portrayed me as both absent due to work and simultaneously a generous brother who had contributed to the ring. The layers of deception were staggering. As the shock began to wear off, anger took its place. Not just anger at the money, though $5,000 was significant, but, at the casual way, they had excluded me from what should have been a family milestone while using my own money to fund it. The betrayal cut to the core of my identity within the family. Was I nothing more than a financial resource to them? A wallet with legs? I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them over the phone. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and got in my car. It was time for a face-to-face conversation with my family about exactly where I stood with them. The 20-minute drive to my parents' suburban home in Belmont felt like hours. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white while my mind rehearsed what I would say. I needed to be calm and rational, not accusatory. Maybe there was an explanation I hadn't considered. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved with an honest conversation. I pulled into the familiar driveway behind an unfamiliar luxury SUV, likely Trevor's Plus. So, they were still celebrating 2 days after the party I hadn't been invited to. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked up to the front door of the house where I'd grown up. Instead of using my key, I rang the doorbell like a stranger. My mother answered, her smile faltering when she saw me, standing there in the middle of a workday. Joey. What a surprise. Is everything okay? We need to talk, Mom, I said quietly, stepping past her into the entryway. I could hear laughter from the dining room. Madison's distinctive giggle, my father's deep chuckle, and a male voice I assumed belonged to Trevor. Mom hesitated, clearly, not wanting to introduce my unexpected arrival into their happy gathering. Can it wait, honey? Madison and Trevor are here with their wedding planner. We're going over some initial ideas. Wedding planner. They were already spending more money. I wondered bitterly if they expected me to fund that too. No, it can't wait, I replied, walking toward the dining room without waiting for her response. The scene I interrupted looked like something from a family sitcom. Madison and a stylishly dressed woman were huddled over a laptop, while my father and a tall, clean-cut man I recognized from photos as Trevor were examining what appeared to be venue brochures. A half-empty bottle of champagne sat in an ice bucket on the table. Joey, Madison exclaimed, looking up with genuine surprise. What are you doing here? I needed to speak with all of you, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. About the withdrawal from my account yesterday, and about the engagement party at the Harborview. An uncomfortable silence descended over the room. The wedding planner, sensing the tension, quietly gathered her materials. Perhaps I should give you all some family time. Madison, we can continue this tomorrow. After she left, Trevor stood and extended his hand. Joey, good to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you. I shook his hand automatically, noting the genuine warmth in his greeting. At least someone seemed happy to see me. Trevor, could you give us a few minutes? My father asked, his expression serious. Family matter. Actually, I interjected, I think Trevor should stay. This concerns him too, since it's about the engagement. My mother bustled around nervously. Joey, we were going to call you today. I know we should have discussed the money before. Before what, Mom? Before taking $5,000 from my account without permission? Or before using that money to buy Madison's engagement ring? Or maybe before throwing a family-wide celebration that I wasn't invited to? Madison's face flushed. We wanted to surprise you with the news. Surprise me. By excluding me from the announcement party that my money paid for. Now hold on. My father interrupted his tone, shifting to one I recognized from childhood, the voice he used when he was about to shut down a discussion. We're joint account holders, Joey. That account was set up for family needs. Family emergencies. I corrected. Madison's engagement ring is not an emergency. We were going to pay you back. My mother insisted not meeting my eyes. We just needed the money quickly. The ring Trevor liked was on sale and there wasn't time to. The ring I liked, Trevor interrupted, looking confused. Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, you told me the ring was within our budget. You never mentioned borrowing money from Joey. Madison shot him a warning look, which he either didn't see or chose to ignore. Your budget was $3,000, my father explained to Trevor, but when we saw the $5,000 ring, we knew it was perfect for Madison. Joey's doing very well financially, and family helps family. I felt like I'd been punched. So you just decided my money was yours to spend, without asking me? And then you threw a party celebrating the purchase, and I wasn't even invited. You're always working, Madison exclaimed. You never have time for family events. We figured you wouldn't want to come anyway. You figured. Did anyone actually ask me? Did anyone call me and say, hey Joey, your sister got engaged. We're celebrating at the Harborview on Monday night. Would you like to join us? The silence that followed was answer enough. We were going to tell you about the money, my mother repeated weakly. When after you'd already spent it. After the party that everyone but me knew about. You told Aunt Susan I couldn't attend because of work. You lied to our family about why I wasn't there, while simultaneously telling them I generously contributed to the ring. Which is it? Am I too busy and disconnected to include? Or am I the generous brother supporting Madison's happiness? Trevor looked increasingly uncomfortable. I had no idea about any of this, he said quietly. I would never have agreed to a ring that put financial strain on anyone. It's not strain, my father dismissed. Joey makes over $100,000 a year. What's $5,000 to someone with that kind of income? My jaw dropped. That's not the point. It's my money. Money I worked hard for. Money I sacrificed for. You had no right to take it without asking, regardless of how much I make. You've always been so selfish about money, Madison said, tears welling in her eyes right on cue. You're the only one in this family who has any. Do you know what it's like to struggle while watching your brother become successful? Do you know how that feels? Yes, actually I do, I replied evenly. I know exactly how it feels to work multiple jobs through college, while you got to focus on the college experience. I know how it feels to drive a 15-year-old car while you got a new one for graduation. I know how it feels to be asked repeatedly to help out with your bills while no one ever asked if I needed help with mine. That's different, my mother protested. You've always been more capable, more independent. More useful as an ATM, you mean? I said bitterly. Now you're just being dramatic, my father cut in. This isn't about you, Joey. This is about Madison's engagement. This should be a happy time for our family, and you're turning it into an opportunity to complain about money. Money you can easily afford to spare. I looked at each of their faces. My father's dismissive anger, my mother's evasive guilt, Madison's calculated tears, and felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. This dynamic wasn't new. It had been our family pattern my entire life. I had just never seen it so starkly before. You know what? Keep the money. Consider it my wedding gift, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. But I want you all to know that what hurts isn't the $5,000. It's that you didn't even consider me important enough to include in a family celebration. It's that you saw me as a resource to tap, not a person to include. Joey, you're overreacting, Madison sniffled. It's not like we deliberately excluded you, we just forgot. Forgot. The word hung in the air between us, more damning than any excuse could have been. Madison, my mother gasped. Well, we did, Madison insisted. We were so caught up in the excitement, And Joey's never around anyway. My father stood up, his patience clearly exhausted. I think you owe your sister an apology, Joey. You've completely ruined her mood on what should be one of the happiest times of her life. I expected better from you. I stared at him in disbelief. Somehow I had become the villain in this scenario. My money had been taken without permission. I'd been excluded from a family event, and now I was being asked to apologize for being upset about it. I'm not apologizing for having reasonable boundaries, I said, quietly backing toward the door. When you're ready to acknowledge what you did wrong here, you know where to find me. As I turned to leave, I caught Trevor's eye. He looked deeply uncomfortable, even sympathetic. He gave me a small nod that somehow conveyed he understood more than he could say in that moment. I walked out of my childhood home feeling like a stranger, the weight of years, of similar if less dramatic incidents, pressing down on me. This wasn't just about $5,000 or a missed party. It was about recognizing a lifetime of being valued for what I could provide rather than who I was. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel as the reality of what had just happened sank in. I had confronted my family about their betrayal, and somehow I'd been cast as the unreasonable one, the villain who was ruining Madison's special moment. Not only had they taken my money and excluded me from a family celebration, but they had also made me feel guilty for being upset about it. The mental gymnastics were impressive and disorienting. Back in my apartment, I sank onto my couch, feeling hollowed out. The place I'd always thought of as a temporary stepping stone, a decent but unremarkable one-bedroom I'd been saving to upgrade from someday, suddenly felt like my only safe space. I stared at the wall for hours, replaying not just today's confrontation, but years of similar dynamics. There was Madison's college graduation, when my parents had asked me to chip in for her graduation gift, a 2-week trip to Europe that cost nearly $7,000. My own graduation gift had been a watch worth maybe $200. There were countless family dinners where the conversation revolved entirely around Madison's life challenges, with barely a question about mine. There was the time I'd been passed over for a promotion at work, and when I mentioned it at Sunday dinner, the topic was quickly changed to Madison's new boyfriend problems. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. Had I been blind all these years to the family dynamic, or had I seen it clearly, but chosen to ignore it, telling myself that being the responsible one was a badge of honor rather than a burden? How many times had I justified their behavior, making excuses for why Madison needed more attention, more support, more resources than I did? By morning, exhausted, but clear-headed, I called my closest friend Tyler. We'd been friends since college, and he had witnessed much of my family dynamic firsthand. They did what he exclaimed after I explained the situation. Dude, that's theft. Joint account or not taking money without discussing it first is beyond messed up. The money hurts, but it's not even the worst part, I admitted. They threw this big family party to celebrate, and I wasn't even invited. They told everyone I was busy with work. They just forgot about me. Tyler was silent for a moment. Joey, I need to say something, and I hope you won't take it the wrong way. This isn't new behavior from them. What do you mean? Remember your 30th birthday. Your parents said they couldn't make it to the dinner because your mom had that minor dental procedure. But I saw Madison's Instagram that night. They were at her friend's art show opening. I felt my chest tighten. You never told me that. I didn't want to hurt you, and there have been other times. Remember when you got that industry award last year? You invited them to the ceremony, and they said they couldn't get off work. But Madison posted photos of them helping her move that same day. Each example hit like a physical blow. I hadn't known about these specific instances, but they fit a pattern I could no longer deny. What do I do now, Tyler? They're still my family. First, secure your money, he said firmly. Close that joint account immediately. Then maybe consider some distance while you process this. You don't have to cut them off forever, but some boundaries seem long overdue. After we hung up, I called in sick to work for the second day in a row, something I'd never done before, and headed to my bank. The process of closing the joint account was straightforward, but emotionally devastating. The bank manager, sensing my distress, moved me to a private office. I'd like to close this joint account and ensure no additional withdrawals can be made, I explained. Of course, Mr. Lancaster. And where would you like the remaining funds transferred? To my personal account, please. As she processed the paperwork, she asked gently, May I ask if there's been an issue with the joint account? I hesitated, embarrassed to admit what had happened. Just a misunderstanding about the purpose of the account. She nodded professionally. That happens more often than you might think with family accounts. Just so you're aware, the other account holder will be notified automatically when this account is closed. I braced myself for the fallout I knew would come. Sure enough, by the time I reached my car, my phone was already ringing with my mother's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then Madison. I silenced my phone and drove to a coffee shop to collect my thoughts. The barrage continued throughout the day. Text messages piled up, each more accusatory than the last. From Mom Joey, what were you thinking closing that account? We need to talk immediately. From Dad, you're acting childishly. Call us back right now. From Madison Way to overreact, that money was for emergencies. My engagement ring was important. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat in the coffee shop, opened my laptop, and began researching apartments in Seattle. My company had an office there, and I'd always loved the Pacific Northwest. The idea of putting 3,000 miles between myself and my family's dysfunction suddenly seemed not just appealing, but necessary. By evening, the text messages had escalated to include extended family members. From Aunt Susan, Joey, your mother is very upset. Whatever disagreement you're having, remember that family comes first. From Uncle Robert, not sure what's going on, but your father says you're being unreasonable about money. Didn't raise you to be greedy, son. From Cousin Rachel, hey Joey, everyone's talking about you closing some account and causing drama during Madison's engagement. Not cool, cuz. The narrative had clearly been spun to cast me as the villain, the wealthy, selfish brother who was jealous of his sister's happiness. No mention, I was sure, of the unauthorized withdrawal or my exclusion from the celebration. The isolation I felt was profound, a sense that an entire family system had united against me because I'd finally stood up for myself. I spent the rest of the week holed up in my apartment, alternating between numbness and clarity. I took more sick days, something my accumulated time off easily accommodated. Each day brought new insights as I reflected on my family relationships with fresh eyes. I remembered how, when I'd bought my car with cash after saving for years, my father had made a joke about how I could easily afford to help Madison with her car payment that month, since I had money to spare. I remembered Christmas gifts, how Madison received thoughtful, expensive presents, while I typically got practical items like dress shirts for work. I remembered countless times when my accomplishments were downplayed, while Madison's smallest victories were celebrated extravagantly. The pattern was undeniable, and seeing it clearly was both devastating and liberating. I wasn't crazy for feeling undervalued. I wasn't selfish for wanting reciprocity and respect. The problem wasn't me. It was a family system that had cast me in the role of provider rather than equal member. By the end of the week, I had submitted a transfer request to my company's Seattle office. I had researched apartments in neighborhoods near that office. I had begun the process of disentangling my life from the city where my family lived, creating physical distance to match the emotional distance I now felt was necessary. The isolation hurt, but it also created space for something new, self-respect. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was prioritizing my own well-being over my family's expectations. It felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. A week after the confrontation at my parents' house, an unexpected knock on my apartment door broke the silence I'd cultivated. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see Madison and Trevor standing in the hallway. I considered pretending I wasn't home, but after a moment's hesitation, I opened the door. "Can we talk?" Madison asked, her usual confidence notably absent. She looked smaller, somehow uncertain, in a way I rarely saw her. I stepped back to allow them in, noting that Trevor carried a small envelope in his hand. My apartment suddenly felt too small, the air too thick with unspoken tensions. We stood awkwardly in my living room until I gestured toward the couch. "I've been trying to call you," Madison began, once they were seated. "I needed some space," I replied simply. Trevor cleared his throat. Joey, I want to apologize. I had no idea the ring money came from you or that you weren't invited to the celebration. When I found out I was. He paused, searching for the right word. Horrified, frankly. His directness surprised me. I'd expected Madison to dominate the conversation with justifications or accusations. I brought this. Trevor continued, holding out the envelope. It's a check for $5,000. I won't wear a ring that causes division in the family Madison's joining. I made no move to take the envelope. This isn't just about the money. I know, he said quietly. But it's a start toward making things right. Madison finally spoke up. I'm sorry too, Joey. I should have made sure you were invited to the party. It was wrong to leave you out. Her apology sounded rehearsed, lacking the genuine remorse I heard in Trevor's voice. Still, it was more than I'd expected from her. Why did you do it? Madison, not just the party, but taking the money without asking. Did you ever consider how that would make me feel? She looked down at her hands. It was Dad's idea, actually. He said, since you make so much money, you wouldn't mind helping with something important to me. And Mom said the joint account was for family needs. She paused. I know that sounds bad now that I say it out loud. It sounds exactly like what happened, I said flatly. I was an ATM, not a brother. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. When Madison told me what happened after you left, I almost called off the engagement. Madison's head snapped up. Trevor. It's true, he said firmly. I was raised to believe character matters. Taking advantage of family isn't something I can stand behind. He turned back to me. I told Madison and your parents that we're starting our marriage with honesty and respect, or we're not starting it at all. I studied him with new appreciation. Trevor had a backbone and a moral compass that I hadn't expected. Maybe Madison had finally found someone who would hold her accountable rather than enable her. The money isn't really the issue, I said after a long moment. It's what it represents. This has been our family dynamic my entire life. I'm expected to give, while Madison receives. I'm excluded from celebrations, but expected to fund them. I'm the responsible one, who should understand when others aren't. I've hit my limit. What are you saying? Madison asked, her voice small. I'm saying I need boundaries with our family. Real, firm boundaries. I've requested a transfer to our Seattle office. I'm moving across the country to get some perspective. You're leaving because of me. Madison looked genuinely shocked. Not because of you. Because of patterns that have been in place our entire lives that I've finally recognized aren't healthy for me. This incident just made it impossible to ignore anymore. Trevor nodded slowly. I understand that. Sometimes distance is the only way to reset relationships. He placed the envelope on my coffee table. Please take this. Not because it fixes everything, but because it's the right thing to do. I looked at the check, then back at Trevor. Keep it, I said finally. Put it toward your future together. But know that this means there are no financial strings attached to our relationship moving forward. No expectations, no obligations. Trevor nodded, understanding the significance of my gesture. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a step toward a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The conversation lasted another hour. Madison cried real tears, not the manipulative ones I'd seen so often before. She admitted to resentment over my financial stability while she struggled with debt. Trevor spoke openly about his own family's healthy dynamics, which had made Madison's family patterns so jarring to him. I shared painful memories of always feeling like the family workhorse rather than a cherished son. After they left, I felt strangely lighter. The conversation hadn't solved everything, but it had brought issues long buried into the open. More importantly, it had shown me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for any hope of healthier relationships moving forward. The following day, I began sessions with Dr. Larson, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. In our first meeting, I poured out the whole story, feeling both ridiculous and relieved to be seeking professional help for something as common as family dysfunction. What you're describing is a classic family system issue, Dr. Larson explained. You were assigned the role of responsible one, while your sister was the one who needs help. These roles become self-perpetuating over time. So this isn't just in my head, I'm not overreacting. Not at all. In fact, your reaction setting boundaries, seeking perspective through distance, getting professional support, is remarkably healthy. Many people remain trapped in toxic family dynamics their entire lives. Over the next several sessions, Dr. Larson helped me draft an email to my parents. Not an angry accusation or a dramatic cutting of ties, but a clear, firm explanation of my feelings and my boundaries moving forward. The email took hours to craft with Dr. Larson, helping me strike the right balance between honesty and compassion. Mom and Dad, I'm writing because I need to express some difficult truths about our family dynamic that I've only recently come to understand clearly myself. The incident with Madison's engagement ring and party was not an isolated event, but part of a pattern that has been damaging to me. For years, I've been cast in the role of financial provider and excluded from important family moments. I've been expected to support Madison emotionally and financially, without receiving similar support for my own life challenges. This has left me feeling used rather than loved. I've accepted a transfer to our Seattle office and will be moving next month. This distance isn't about punishment. It's about creating space for me to develop a healthier sense of self-worth outside of what I can provide to others. Moving forward, I need the following boundaries to be respected. I will not provide financial support to Madison or anyone else without explicit agreement beforehand. I expect to be included in family gatherings and informed about important events. I need acknowledgement of the hurt caused by past exclusions and financial expectations. I love you both, and I hope this distance will eventually lead to a more balanced and healthy relationship between us all. Joey. Hitting send on that email was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. There was no immediate response, which Dr. Larson assured me was normal. People often needed time to process boundary setting, especially when it disrupted long-established patterns. Meanwhile, my transfer to Seattle was approved. I found an apartment in a neighborhood called Fremont known for its quirky atmosphere and proximity to tech companies. I began the process of packing up my life in Boston, feeling both terrified and liberated by the impending change. The Seattle office welcomed the transfer enthusiastically. My reputation as a reliable, skilled engineer had preceded me, and the team was excited to have me join their current projects. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of professional validation that helped counterbalance the personal turmoil. Trevor reached out occasionally with updates. He and Madison had postponed wedding planning temporarily while they worked through some family issues. He didn't elaborate, but I sensed he was standing firm on his principles, forcing Madison and my parents to confront patterns they'd likely never questioned before. As my departure date approached, I felt increasingly certain I was making the right choice. The physical distance would give me space to heal, to build a life based on my own values rather than my family's expectations. It wasn't running away, it was running towards something healthier. 3 months into my new life in Seattle, I'd established a comfortable routine. My apartment overlooked a small park, where I often took morning runs. My colleagues at the Seattle office had welcomed me warmly, and I'd even started dating casually, something I'd neglected in Boston while focused on career advancement. The physical distance from my family had created emotional space to examine our dynamics more objectively without the immediate triggers that had kept me locked in unhealthy patterns. Contact with my family had been minimal, but not non-existent. My parents had eventually responded to my email with a brief acknowledgement that they needed time to think about what I'd said. Madison occasionally sent text updates about wedding planning, which had resumed on a more modest scale. These communications were cordial but surface level, lacking the depth needed to address our fundamental issues. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday evening as I was cooking dinner, my phone rang with my father's number. This was unusual. He typically texted, rather than called, especially since I'd moved away. Joey, his voice sounded strained. Your mother's in the hospital. She collapsed at work today. The doctors are saying it's stress-related, high blood pressure, maybe a mild heart attack. They're running tests now. The news hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, I loved my mother. The thought of her in a hospital bed, vulnerable and afraid, cut through the protective distance I'd carefully constructed. What hospital? How serious is it? I asked already, moving to my laptop to check flights. Massachusetts General. They're saying she's stable, but they want to keep her for observation. He paused. She's been different since you left. Quieter. She misses you, Joey. The implicit guilt trip wasn't lost on me. The suggestion that my boundary setting had contributed to my mother's health crisis was exactly the kind of emotional leverage my family had always used. But this was also my mother's health at stake. I'll get on the next flight, I said, already searching for options. Thank you, son, my father replied, his voice cracking slightly. The family needs to be together right now. I booked a red-eye flight, threw some clothes into a duffel bag, and headed to the airport, my mind racing. Part of me feared this was manipulation, a crisis manufactured or exaggerated to draw me back into old patterns. But I couldn't take that chance. If my mother was truly ill, I needed to be there, regardless of our unresolved issues. Landing in Boston early the next morning, I took a taxi directly to Massachusetts General Hospital. The familiar city skyline stirred complicated emotions. This had been my home for my entire life, until 3 months ago. It held both comfort and pain, memories of achievement and memories of betrayal. At the hospital, I found my way to my mother's room. Taking a deep breath outside her door, I steeled myself for whatever family dynamic awaited me inside. Nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The room was filled with family: my father, Madison, and Trevor, both grandmothers, 2 aunts, an uncle, and several cousins. All eyes turned to me as I entered, expressions ranging from relief to uncertainty to something that looked almost like shame. My mother looked smaller in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, her usually perfectly styled hair limp against the pillow. But her eyes brightened when she saw me, filling with tears. "Joey," she whispered. "You came." I moved to her bedside, taking her hand gently. "Of course I came. How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're here," she said, squeezing my fingers weakly. The room fell into an awkward silence. I was acutely aware of the many eyes watching our reunion, the weight of unresolved tensions hanging in the air. "Could Joey and I have a few minutes alone?" my mother asked suddenly, looking around the room. There was a shuffle as everyone filed out, my father pausing at the door with a look I couldn't quite interpret. When the room was empty, except for us, my mother's composure cracked. "I'm so sorry, Joey," she sobbed, tears flowing freely now. "When the doctor told me my condition was stress-related, I knew. I knew it was the weight of what we'd done to you. The guilt has been eating me alive these past months. I hadn't expected this. I'd prepared for defensiveness, for subtle manipulation, for the same old patterns, not for this raw admission of wrongdoing." "Mom, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "What we did with the money was wrong. Not inviting you to the party was wrong. The way we've treated you for years, expecting you to always be the strong one, the provider, without giving you the same support we gave Madison, it was wrong. All of it." I sat carefully on the edge of the bed, stunned by her words. Why now? What changed? "After you left, your email forced us to really look at ourselves. Your father didn't want to at first. He was angry, defensive. But I couldn't stop thinking about what you'd written. Then Trevor," she smiled slightly, "that young man has more backbone than I gave him credit for. He refused to move forward with wedding plans until we addressed the toxic family patterns, as he called them. He even gave us books about family systems and codependency." I made a mental note to thank Trevor later. His influence had apparently done what my years of quiet acceptance never could. "The doctor says I need to reduce stress," she continued. "But how could I, carrying the knowledge of how we'd hurt you, Joey? I don't expect immediate forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please know that I see now what we did. And I'm truly sorry." It was the apology I'd wanted but never expected to receive. My eyes burned with unshed tears as I nodded, unable to speak immediately. When I found my voice, I said simply, "Thank you for saying that, Mom. It means a lot." Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. My father poked his head in. "Everything okay in here?" My mother beckoned him in. "Brian, tell Joey what we discussed." My father entered the room with uncharacteristic hesitancy. The confident, sometimes domineering man I'd known all my life looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Joey," he began awkwardly, "your mother's right. We've done some hard thinking since you left. I didn't want to admit it at first, but we were wrong. The money, the party, all of it. And not just that incident, but the way things have been for years. He sat heavily in the visitor's chair. I always told myself I was being fair, that Madison needed more help and you were more capable. But that wasn't fair at all. We put too much on your shoulders and didn't celebrate you enough. His admission left me speechless. My father had never been one to admit fault or show vulnerability. This was unprecedented territory. The door opened again, and Madison entered with Trevor beside her. She looked like she'd been crying. "The nurse says we shouldn't all crowd in here at once," she said, "but I needed to be part of this conversation." She approached the bed tentatively. "Joey, I'm sorry too. Trevor's helped me see how entitled I've been, how I just expected you to always help me, without ever considering your feelings." Trevor stood supportively at her side, but remained silent, allowing this to be Madison's moment of accountability. "I canceled the big wedding we were planning," Madison continued. "We're doing something small instead within our actual budget. And I've been seeing a financial counselor to get my spending under control." She glanced at Trevor with a mixture of affection and respect. "Trevor says we start our marriage on solid ground or not at all." I looked around at my family, my tearful mother in the hospital bed, my humbled father in the visitor's chair, my sister, showing a level of self-awareness I'd never witnessed before. It was surreal, like watching characters I'd known all my life suddenly begin reading from a different script. "We want you to come home," Joey, my father said. "Not just for a visit. We want you to move back to Boston." The request caught me off guard. "Dad, I have a job in Seattle now. An apartment, the beginnings of a new life." I know, he backpedaled quickly. "I'm not asking you to uproot everything this instant, just consider it. Maybe down the road. We miss you. We want a chance to build something better." I looked at their hopeful faces and felt torn. Part of me yearned for the family connection I'd always wanted, one based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. But another part remembered the clarity I'd found through distance, the perspective that 3,000 miles had given me. "I need time," I said finally. "This is all a lot to process. I appreciate the apologies truly. But trust takes time to rebuild." My mother reached for my hand again. "We understand. We'll respect whatever you decide." As visiting hours ended and the family began to disperse, my grandmother pulled me aside in the hospital corridor. At 82, Grandma Ruth was the family matriarch, a woman of few words but considerable wisdom. "Walk with me to the cafeteria," she said, linking her arm through mine. Once we were alone, she spoke with uncharacteristic frankness. "You did the right thing, Joey, setting those boundaries. Reminds me of what I had to do with your grandfather's family back in the day." I looked at her in surprise. "You never told me about that." "Some stories wait for the right time to be told," she replied. "Your grandfather's family treated me like an outsider for years. Always the last to know about. Gatherings always expected to contribute, but never appreciated. Sound familiar?" I nodded, stunned by the parallel. "One day I'd had enough. Packed up your infant father and moved us to my sister's place for 3 months. Best decision I ever made." She patted my arm. "Distance gives clarity. Don't let them rush you back, just because they're finally seeing what they should have seen all along." Her validation was like cool water in a desert. "What should I do, Grandma?" "Trust yourself, Joey. You found the courage to break unhealthy patterns. That same wisdom will tell you when, or if, it's right to return. Just don't mistake an apology for changed behavior. One is words, the other takes time to prove." As I hugged her goodbye, I felt a profound gratitude for her perspective. She had walked this path before me and emerged with her dignity intact. I could do the same. I spent 3 more days in Boston, dividing my time between the hospital and catching up with friends. My mother was discharged with strict instructions to reduce stress and follow up with her cardiologist. The family crisis had sparked genuine introspection, but as Grandma Ruth had warned, real change would take time to verify. On my last evening before returning to Seattle, I had dinner with Madison and Trevor. Away from our parents' influence, Madison seemed different, more thoughtful, less entitled. Trevor spoke openly about his own family's healthy dynamics and how they contrasted with what he'd witnessed in ours. I told Madison I wouldn't join a family system that would eventually make our own children feel how you've been made to feel, he said frankly. That was my line in the sand. As I boarded my flight back to Seattle the next morning, I carried mixed emotions. The apologies had been more than I'd expected, the admissions of wrongdoing, unprecedented in our family history. But Grandma Ruth's caution echoed in my mind. An apology wasn't the same as changed behavior. I would maintain my distance for now, not as punishment, but as protection for myself and paradoxically for the potential of healthier family relationships in the future. Real reconciliation, if it happened, would require time, consistency, and continued respect for the boundaries I'd established. Despite my family's tearful pleas at the hospital, I returned to Seattle determined to maintain the new life I was building. This wasn't about punishing them anymore. It was about honoring the clarity and peace I'd found through distance. My mother's health scare had been genuine, but so was my need for continued independence from the family dynamic that had defined me for so long. The first few weeks after my Boston visit brought a flurry of communication attempts from my family. My mother sent handwritten letters expressing her ongoing regret and sharing updates about her recovery. My father, less eloquent but equally persistent, texted regularly with awkward but sincere inquiries about my life in Seattle. Madison's messages showed a new self-awareness, often mentioning insights from her financial counseling sessions or books about family dynamics that Trevor had recommended. I responded to all of them, but maintained clear boundaries. Our communications were cordial, but not deeply emotional. I shared selective aspects of my Seattle life while keeping private the deeper journey of self-discovery I was undertaking. Dr. Larson, who continued our sessions via video calls, affirmed this approach. You're not obligated to make yourself vulnerable to people who have hurt you, even if they're now apologetic, she explained during one session. Trust is rebuilt slowly, through consistent actions over time, not through intense emotional reconnection. My Seattle life continued to develop in ways that surprised and delighted me. The city's tech community was vibrant and welcoming, less competitive and more collaborative than Boston's. I joined a hiking group that explored the magnificent landscapes surrounding the city each weekend. For the first time in years, I was developing interests and relationships that had nothing to do with work or family obligations. 6 months after my move, Madison and Trevor made good on their promise to scale back their wedding plans, opting for an intimate ceremony at a botanical garden with just 50 guests. When the invitation arrived at my Seattle apartment, I noticed they had listed me as honored guest rather than including me in the family procession. It was a small gesture that acknowledged my current distance from the family, while still expressing their desire for my presence. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Larson, I decided to attend. Flying back to Boston for the weekend, I chose to stay at a hotel, rather than with my parents, maintaining the physical boundaries that had become important to my healing process. The wedding itself was tasteful and modest, nothing like the extravaganza my parents had initially envisioned. During the reception, Trevor sought me out for a private conversation on the garden terrace. I want you to know how much your stand against the family's behavior influenced me, he said, sipping champagne as we watched the sun set over the garden. It gave me permission to question things I might otherwise have accepted as just how families are. I never meant to cause discord, I admitted. I just couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. You didn't cause anything. You just stopped enabling patterns that were already problematic. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Madison's different now. She's taking responsibility for her finances, working through her issues with entitlement. Your parents are trying too, though old habits die hard. I smiled at his diplomatic phrasing. And how are you handling joining this complicated family? With clear boundaries, he laughed. I learned from the best. His expression grew serious. Madison and I have an agreement. Our future kids will never be cast as either the responsible one or the one who needs help. We're breaking that cycle. His words filled me with unexpected hope. Perhaps the pain of my experience would serve a larger purpose, preventing another generation from experiencing the same damaging dynamics. After the wedding, I returned to Seattle with renewed confidence in my decision to maintain distance. My family was changing, but so was I. The person I was becoming in Seattle, more self-assured, more aware of my own worth, beyond what I could provide for others, needed room to continue growing. In the months that followed, I met Allison, a marine biologist who had moved to Seattle from San Diego. Our relationship developed naturally without the pressure I'd often felt in previous romantic connections. Allison's family, whom I eventually met during a visit to California, demonstrated what healthy family dynamics could look like: supportive without being enmeshed, loving without being controlling. "Your family's actually nice to each other," I remarked after our first dinner with her parents and siblings, and they asked me questions about my life that had nothing to do with what I could do for them. Allison looked at me sadly. "That should be normal, Joey, not exceptional." Her perspective helped me recognize how much my expectations had been lowered by years of family dysfunction. Through her eyes, I could see more clearly both how abnormal my family's treatment had been and how much healthier relationships were possible. My professional life flourished as well. Free from the constant emotional drain of navigating family expectations, I found new creative energy for my work. A year after my move, I was promoted to lead development engineer, a position that recognized both my technical skills and my growing leadership abilities. When I shared this news with my family during our now regular video calls, their reactions showed subtle but significant changes from past patterns. Rather than immediately asking how the promotion would affect my financial situation, and by extension, what I might be able to provide for them, they asked about my responsibilities, whether I was excited about the role, and how I celebrated the achievement. A year and a half after my departure from Boston, I agreed to a family reunion over Thanksgiving. My parents suggested a neutral location, a rented lake house in Vermont, rather than pressuring me to return to their home. Madison and Trevor would attend, as would Grandma Ruth and a few other extended family members who had been supportive of my boundaries. I brought Allison, nervous about introducing her to the complicated dynamics of my family, but confident in our relationship's strength. The gathering was neither perfectly harmonious nor unbearably tense. It existed in the messy middle ground of a family system in transition. There were awkward moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, but also genuine connections that would have been impossible in our previous dynamic. On the last evening of the reunion, as everyone gathered around a bonfire by the lake, my father cleared his throat in that way that always preceded what he considered an important statement. "I want to say something to Joey," he announced, drawing all eyes to me. I tensed instinctively, but his next words surprised me. "Son, I've been doing a lot of reflecting these past months. I realized I never really told you how proud I am of the man you've become." My mother reached over to squeeze his hand encouragingly. "Not because of your success or your money," he continued, "but because of your integrity, the courage it took to stand up to us, to demand respect when we weren't giving it. That's real strength." I didn't see it at first, because it challenged everything I thought I knew about family. But I see it now, and I'm grateful for the wake-up call, even if it came the hard way. His words, spoken in front of the entire family, were a public acknowledgement I'd never expected to receive. They didn't erase the past hurts, but they created space for something new to grow in their place. Later that night, as Allison and I walked along the lakeshore under a canopy of stars, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever move back to Boston?" I considered the question carefully. I don't think so. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because Seattle has become home. I found myself here, in ways I never could have in Boston, surrounded by all those old expectations and memories. She nodded, understanding. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't going back to fix what was broken, but building something new instead. That insight crystallized the lesson of my journey. Setting boundaries with my family hadn't just been about protecting myself from further exploitation. It had created space for genuine growth, for discovering who I could be outside the limiting roles I'd been assigned. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who sees your true worth, who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your successes without immediately calculating what they might gain from them. Sometimes that includes biological relatives, sometimes it doesn't. The true measure isn't blood, but behavior. For years, I had allowed my family to define my value by what I could provide rather than who I was. Breaking free of that definition had been painful but necessary. The money they had taken and the party they had excluded me from weren't the real issues. They were just the final evidence of a pattern I had ignored for too long. Today, my relationship with my family continues to evolve. It's not perfect, but it's healthier than it was, largely because I refused to accept less than I deserved. That refusal wasn't selfish. It was an act of self-respect that ultimately benefited everyone involved. By refusing to play my assigned role, I forced a reckoning that might never have happened otherwise. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, remember, establishing boundaries isn't about punishing others, it's about honoring yourself. You deserve relationships that value you for who you are, not just what you can provide. Sometimes creating distance is the only way to gain clarity. And sometimes that clarity is the greatest gift you can give yourself and ultimately your family too. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did it change your relationship? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stand firm in your worth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own journey.